What's up, friends? In this week's video, we're continuing documenting the process on building the Mecha-Gargant. So most of my time this week was basically spent 3D printing parts. I would be dry fitting some, checking the sizing and the fitment, just reprinting the part. So most of what I'm going to be showing you is sort of just getting sort of underlying structure, the skeleton all printed and built, and then talking more about the next steps. So I've been printing off the parts for probably about 36 hours now, and I've pretty much gotten everything printed insofar as working pieces. I've gotten the sizes set up. So if you watched my previous video, you'll know that I was basically going to print up my demo figure at 200% size. So twice the size, and that's going to be my baseline. So that's my 100%. From there, I did a scale mock-up or proof of concept where I scaled up the legs to 130% and then swapped out the hands. Now, getting the parts all printed, I was actually not super happy with the legs. The thighs in particular, it didn't feel like they would function very well. It felt too cramped, and I would have to rebuild the torso, particularly the hips, out much wider to give the hips and the legs the range of motion that would be required. But then I found that would impact sort of the space between the hips and the arms. And I also printed up a different hip piece or pelvis piece where I wanted to have these working mandibles, these little articulating hands to sort of manipulate and grab some of the tinier pieces and hold on to them, while the larger sets of arms were used to fight off enemies or grapple with whatever. So I ended up compromising and finding a set of, or printing off a set of legs that were 115%, and I think they feel nice. My only issue with them was the arms still felt a little small. And so along with that, I printed up a set of arms that are also 115% of the scale. And I feel like it looks really, really good. I think there's a good proportion. Now, admittedly, because they don't fit in the ball and socket, the only way I was able to sort of test fit and pose this thing was with blue tack, and it gets really messy to clean up. So I've left it off for the purposes of recording this video. One of the other things I was also struggling with was the level of detail in these arms and legs. They're brilliant, don't get me wrong. I really love the way they look, but it becomes very difficult to add detail onto, or to sort of play around with, to actually add my own personal touch and the styling that I've already established within my other Junkforce vehicles. So I picked up another set of STLs from Techo Toys as well, and I believe it's their Fat Boy, which has a much slimmer, a much simplified profile for both the arms and the legs. So I'm currently printing those off at 150%, along with some extra weapons and pieces that I can use for the actual final part. So once I get that done, I'll be able to start putting everything together, start gluing it all, and actually start building the thing. I also printed off a couple of sets of the hands. This was the original at 130, and this was at the 115. Once I start hacking apart the hands, I'm not quite sure yet which one's going to fit better. I'm leaning towards, I think, the 115, but depending on how everything fits together, I feel like having the larger hands might still feel nicer. I won't know until I actually start building everything together. I also found another mech that I used, another program called Mesh Mixer, to sort of hack apart some of the legs, and then I printed up the pelvis piece for that, and two thighs as a sort of detailing or bit that I can add to the base. Something that I was doing while I was waiting for all of these parts to print. I was using my little mock-up figure, and I played around with it a bit, tried to find a couple of poses that could potentially be used for the final piece. There's one I really, really like, sort of the imagery of a hunter stalking its prey. So I imagine him holding onto some sort of long rifle or high caliber sniper rifle, and then he's perched atop his prey, 1 foot raised, and then he has the cockpit open, and the halflings can be inside and out, surveying the kill, sort of hacking apart or determining what can be kept, what can be salvaged, and then gathering it all up, wrapping up, and then bringing it back to the camp. So one of the things I'm also printing up is a high caliber rifle that's going to end up being probably about 8 or 9 inches tall once it's fully complete. I think I'm really happy with this pose though, and it's probably going to be, at least for this Kraken Eater Mecha-Gargant, the pose I'm going to go with. There are a couple of others I really like that I may hold on to, or if I do build more robots. That's something for down the road. So I've now got the Mecha-Gargant core, or I guess the skeleton, built. This is pretty much the size that I was expecting to have it at. It stands about 8 to 9 inches, depending on where you're measuring to, whether the top of the actual mech itself, or you're counting the cockpit canopy and the rifle. I've left his left arm separate because I'm not sure how much larger the thigh is going to be once I start adding the plates and detail on top. I want his left hand to be resting and sort of clamped over the knee and the thigh. So until I get that bulked out, this will be left separate because the fingers, they are articulating. And so I want it to be resting as much as possible on the thigh. The left hand is assembled, but it's only blue tacked in, same with the rifles, so that I can take them apart and both detail them and paint them. Yes, Jonesy. So I'm really happy with the way this is turning out so far. I'm going to have to give it a think over to start working up how I want the silhouette to look, to start thinking about how I want to add those extra details and plates to really change this into a scratch build and not just a 3D print of a robot. I think that's probably my biggest concern right now, is that I may not do enough to this piece to really differentiate it from the original design, and this then would not really count as a scratch build. I also think one of the, that was not really a concern because I don't expect to play in any GW tournaments anytime soon, is the fact that I probably won't be allowed to play him in any official tournaments. And obviously the major one I think is Adepticon. Well, really, I don't know if it'll be like, oh, you're not allowed to play, but more, we're not going to let you get on Warhammer TV, which is a concern legitimately. And for one reason why I may actually prefer to bring Gotrek to something like an official GW tournament as opposed to this Mecha-Gargant, which may just be reserved for friendly games. I mean, on that tangent, I still think, or I'm still on the fence about whether Gotrek or a Mecha-Gargant fits better in the army, or whether I want to run a different kind of list, maybe with double Ironclads instead of either of these. Who knows? I think a lot will change depending on a lot of the newer armies coming out and how they shift the meta. Just in terms of raw killing power, everything I'm hearing about stuff like the new Cruel Boys and the Stormcast, I don't know if a Mecha-Gargant will actually survive very long compared to a Gotrek. So we'll see. I need to get more games under my belt. For the astute of you who play video games, this is, I believe, a rifle from Overwatch. Don't know which character. I found it on Thingiverse. And then I found a 50 cal rifle barrel, or something very similar to. So I just did a piece swap or a barrel swap on the two because I like the porting. And then I have a magazine clip from that same 50 cal rifle as well. I'm going to figure out where to attach, probably down here. And then I can model a bandolier of just really big bullets onto this robot strap somewhere. I also like the idea of giving him a pistol, a holstered pistol somewhere that's really big, and just to make it feel a little more anthropomorphic. In terms of sort of the details I know I for sure want to do, I want to have hydraulic pistons connecting the canopy to the body, the cockpit. I want to get some sort of a climbing ladder roped in right here. I want to have a halfling here surveying the kill, a halfling in there doing a check on systems or whatever. I know I definitely want a cooler in there with some clipboards, some cups and cans. And then at the very, very least, I can start gap filling. There's a couple of, or there was a piece here I had to cut off because it was starting to warp a bit. And then because I printed the rifle hollow, I do need to fill this piece of the rifle. And then if you can see it in the torso as well. I don't know if it was a warpage or just a shrinkage in the printing, but the canopy of the torso, the top and bottom, they don't meet flush. So there is a bit of a gap that I have to fill. It runs across the entire piece. So I'll have to gap fill that as well. And then I think I need to cut and tweak the toes on this to wrap it around the debris on the ground. This might have been smarter to cut apart before assembling it, but sue me, I got excited. So one of the issues that I've been experiencing with 3D printing, especially in creating hollow figures where you don't allow for drain holes to empty the resin out as you're printing, when you start hacking and slashing and cutting into these pieces, that the exposure to air and the elements can cause resin inside that hasn't been cured to create a chemical reaction that forces the resin to expand and can crack from the inside out. And so when I printed this rifle, knowing that I would be cutting it apart and modifying it or drilling into it, I thought I was printing this rifle solid. I didn't hollow it out, but I guess I didn't really inspect the 3D model itself. My fault entirely, I guess. The person who modeled the STL on Thingiverse actually modeled the entire thing hollow, and I didn't do a quick check or an x-ray check to check the insides. So this actual body of the rifle is hollow, and when I cut off this bracket, I unintentionally opened up or exposed the insides to air. This is when I realized that it was hollow. So using some water and some isopropyl alcohol, I quickly just squeezed and tried to clean the internals with this mixture, rinsing it out thoroughly and letting it dry. And unfortunately, there was some resin that was still left over inside, and it did crack. So the crack, fortunately, was at least for now, a small hairline. It was essentially there running up the back and the side there. So what I did was I peeled off the back to expose the internal core and to give it a channel to flow through. I rinsed it for another 5 or 10 minutes just to really get the resin out. And then I quickly UV cured using my cure station to try and force the inside to fully cure. So I'm going to leave this rifle as it is. Hopefully over the next week or two, this is the extent of the cracking and I won't see any further damage. If it does continue to crack, depending on what damage may occur, if it can be salvaged, great. If not, I may have to reprint another rifle and manually insert some drain holes to prevent this thing from happening. Also just a learning thing for me, I guess. 1, create drain holes for models that I intend to hollow out. And then 2, double check models that you get to make sure that they are solid and not hollow. So that's pretty much it for this video. Unfortunately, beyond printing and putting together the basic underlying structure of the Mecha-Gargant, I didn't really get much done on it. Starting the new job, sort of tackling that stuff, and then I've been unfortunately building a sizable backlog of Marvel miniatures and stuff that I want to get done. And then wanting to, in particular, get my modular subway board done has sort of impacted the amount of time I've actually spent working on this, which is fine, honestly. I think at this point now, a lot of the work that needs to be done on the mech is getting all of the actual scratch building done. So a lot of plasticard work, a lot of sculpting work, stuff that's not going to get done within the next week or two, and most likely won't be done until much later on, probably mid-late October, when there is more to show. So rather than do a lot more incremental videos showing just tiny little changes, I'm going to be documenting the process the entire time over the next month and a half. And then the next video I will release for the Mecha-Gargant will actually have all that content put together. So unfortunately, if you're following this journey live, the next update, at least in terms of the video form for the Mecha-Gargant, won't be coming until probably at least a few weeks down the road as I try and work through some other projects in the meantime. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you keep following along. I will be continuing to post updates on the progress on my Instagram. So if you want to check that out, I'll drop a link to my social platforms in the description below. Until next time, as always, happy hobbying.